This is Noise from the Cranium. My name is Doug, and in this episode I'm going to feature part 1 of an interview with Yardbirds drummer Jim McCarty.
Hi, this is Jim McCarty of the Yardbirds.
In 2009, when the Yardbirds were touring North America, my buddy from Neptoon Records, Rob Frith, caught up with McCarty prior to their upcoming gig in Vancouver. For any music buff of 60s rock, British invasion band the Yardbirds will need no introduction. Briefly, for the uninitiated, the Yardbirds were formed in 1963 in London, and were as well known for their track record as they were for their actual records, with a core of Keith Ralph on vocals and harmonica, Chris Dreja on rhythm guitar, Paul Samuel Smith on bass, and Jim McCarty on drums. The band had a revolving door of soon-to-be famous guitar players. Instead of the usual questions about Eric, Jeff, and Jimmy, Rob chose to ask Jim questions that were a bit more obscure, hoping to jog the deeper recesses of his memory. Jim welcomed the challenge.
It'll be quite nice to have some different ways, actually, to be honest.
The band got their first big break when they became the house band at the Crawdaddy Club. Not only did they replace the Rolling Stones in that capacity, but they were also signed to a management contract by club owner Giorgio Gomelsky. Gomelsky managed the band until 1966, proving to be quite industrious. His ideas were often innovative and groundbreaking, while other times they proved to be not so successful. For better or worse, he was instrumental in shaping the band during their formative years. In the early days, after they had replaced original guitarist Anthony Top Topham with Eric Clapton, singer Keith Ralph struggled with a series of health issues, mostly stemming from having only one lung.
Keith was quite a lot with his chest problems and things. He had emphysema and asthma, and he only had one lung. And so he could be quite ill.
Ralph would miss the odd show, with McCarty himself stepping in on occasion.
I think I've done a couple myself, singing for the drums. I think that was probably pretty last minute.
Other times they would use a singer they knew to sub in for Ralph.
We had a guy called Mick O'Neill at one time, right back in the Clapton days. We did a few gigs, I remember, around England with this guy, Mick O'Neill, who was kind of showman, but he was not really a very good singer.
Initially, both Clapton and the band flourished. However, it became clear that Clapton, a blues purist, was increasingly more uncomfortable with the direction the band was taking. Enamored with the success of bands like the Beatles, Gomelsky pushed for the Yardbirds to ease off on the strict blues approach and try for a hit record. The first real success for Gomelsky and the band was For Your Love, a radio-friendly pop song that made it to #1 on the charts in both the UK and Canada. The song came complete with a harpsichord intro played by English keyboard legend Brian Auger. Jim talks about some of Gomelsky's ideas, like getting Auger to play on the song.
Through Giorgio, because Brian Auger, Trinity or whatever, I think he was with Tom Baldry and Julie Driscoll, and he was their manager. So that came through Giorgio. He was a nice guy, Brian.
After recording For Your Love, Clapton didn't disguise his growing dissatisfaction with the direction the band was heading with Gomelsky, and left, eventually joining John Mayall's Blues Breakers. Thus began phase 2 of the Yardbirds' career, with Eric's replacement Jeff Beck on guitar. Unlike Clapton, Beck was open to experimentation and could easily be coaxed out of the band's earlier traditional playing and into a more experimental and wilder approach. Gomelsky kept the band busy doing TV appearances and concerts all over the UK, Switzerland, and France. He was even savvy enough to get them to do promotional videos like the one for Your Love, where the band is in a field wearing medieval armor. In 1965, with Beck, the band toured America, but there were problems.
I know the first tour, we couldn't get a work permit. We couldn't play any gigs.
In a series of cool initiatives, and with US gigs few and far between due to ongoing issues with the Musicians Union and their visas, Gomelsky used their time in the States to do some recording. In September, they went into the studio with iconic producer Sam Phillips in Memphis, Tennessee, and cut Mr. You're a Better Man Than I and Train Kept a Rollin'. Did Sam Phillips actually attend the sessions?
Oh, yeah, he was the DJ, the engineer.
What was he like?
Well, he was a real character. See, when we turned up at the studio, this is typical Giorgio, he was out. He was out fishing. So we had to hang around waiting. This was in the evening. I don't know what time we went in, but probably quite a late session by the time he got back. So was there a sign on the door, gone fishing? Probably.
That wasn't the only problem.
Keith was a bit drunk, and we went into the session, and Philip said, well, yeah, it's a nice band, he said. It's a good band, but you've got to get rid of the singer. And, he thought everyone was good, except for Keith, who was drunk, and of course he couldn't sing when he was drunk. And his vocal, which is probably one of the main takes, his vocals on, and then he overdubbed another vocal, was sober in New York. So that's why you've got those funny vocals going on.
That same month, they got a chance to record at another legendary studio, recording the song I'm a Man at Chess Studios in Chicago, home of the blues sounds that they've been emulating.
So that was a Giorgio idea. That was a good idea.
Was the band looking forward to it, considering the history of the music there?
Well, it was all very last minute. You never really know with Giorgio what's going on. I mean, you'd be in America and you get a phone call sort of early in the morning, that sort of thing. Oh, come on, get up. We're going down to Chess Studios. Or something crazy like that, the last minute. I don't know if Chess was actually like that, because I think we were in already in Chicago, and he'd have a brainwave, and all of a sudden you'd be summoned,
Once getting into the studio, it must have been a thrill.
And it was so very exciting for us. And it was a really good sound compared to in the English studios. They didn't have that history of late rock and roll.
The American studios were better than the English studios at that time.
Oh, yeah, at that time, yeah. They were used to recording, rock and roll and getting good drum sounds.
The band were back in Chess Studios in December, completing the backing tracks for one of their greatest, and what might just be one of the first psychedelic songs, Shapes of Things.
Shapes of things before my eyes, just teach me to despise. Will time make man more wise? Here, within my lonely frame, my eyes just hurt my brain, but will it seem the same? Come tomorrow, will I be older? Come tomorrow, may be a soldier. Come tomorrow, may I be bolder than today.
The Yardbirds' early albums were a ragtag mix of singles, album cuts, and live performances, and would vary depending on the country of issue. Their first UK album, 5 Live Yardbirds, wasn't released in North America at all. The 1965 releases for For Your Love and Having a Rave Up with the Yardbirds were not released in the UK, and even their 1966 release, Roger the Engineer, was released in North America as Over, Under, Sideways, Down. In some cases, there were actually different versions of songs released, with some songs being longer, shorter, or simply containing a different mix.
Oh yeah, that's funny though, isn't it? Interesting.
Rob got quite a chuckle out of Jim when he asked him if the band had anything to do with the song choices, or whether they were mistakes where maybe the wrong master tapes were used.
I don't think we had any say. We didn't know what was going on. Maybe Giorgio did it, but people would say, oh, well, we'll do this version. And it was very untogether, really.
One of Gomelsky's less than stellar ideas was for the band to perform at the Sanremo Festival in Italy in January 1966. The Yardbirds performed 2 songs, including one called Paf Bum.
Well, that was done at that terrible Sanremo Song Contest. It's actually not terrible now. It's become something quite good.
Was this festival appearance the root of the split with Gomelsky?
Well, he didn't help. I mean, he had lots of good ideas going around the world, but I mean, he was very much into the European culture, coming, you know, his background and all that. And he saw the Sanremo Song Contest as getting us hugely promoted in Europe. But sort of backfired because I think we were the first band that was ever involved in it, first sort of like a rock band. And all these people were there, all dressed up in the tuxedos and stuff. That's the way it worked.
By the time Roger the Engineer was released in July 1966, they had split with their manager, Gomelsky. To facilitate the split, they had to make a deal, giving him the rights to the recordings produced by Gomelsky.
It was part of the settlement that we did. We were sort of led along our path to settle with him because we wanted to change management. And of course, in those days, we had no idea that we were going to last so long. I think part of the deal was that, if any of these tracks are re-released again, then Giorgio has the right. There's not much chance of these tracks being re-released and going on becoming big hits again.
Luckily, they retained their songwriting royalties.
Oh, yeah.
Those tunes?
Yeah, the writing's been good, and also from that point of view, there's been lots of covers.
Even though Gomelsky had the rights to the music, he told the band he'd given the rights away to Charlie Records.
Very odd, because we got this story. Giorgio had the rights, and then we met him in person, Chris and I, and he told us this long, drawn-out story about how he gave away the rights. I mean, God knows if it's true, because he gave them to Charlie Records. Then, Charlie Records tried to screw the band out of a percentage of the songwriting royalties by adding the label owner's wife, Hilda Young, as co-writer of the songs. John Luke Young is the president or runs the company.
Oh, I see. Because it was
Hilda Young's wife. I mean, he was trying to do us out of even more money. The MCPS or the PRS or whatever in England, they didn't let that go through.
In part 2, McCarty talks about their managers Simon Napier Bell and Mickey Most, how Beck and Page worked together, and how watching Jake Holmes opening for the Yardbirds led the band to covering the song Dazed and Confused. My thanks to Rob Frith from Neptoon Records for the use of the interview, and to Jim McCarty for sharing his cool stories. I'm going to leave you with Jeff Beck's iconic guitar solo on Shapes of Things. This has been Noise from the Cranium. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.